And with a subscription base too, maybe one day you wake up and you're like, actually, we're going to go in a different direction. We're going to change our hand a little bit. We're not going to need scannability. You can cancel it, right? It's not something that you have to be a part of for the rest of your life. It's not like that at all. There's a tremendous amount of flexibility that you can truly see with this. Thinking about adding barcode scanning to your JD Edwards environment, not sure if you'll end up with a predictable subscription or a pile of hidden costs. Today, we're diving deep into the real cost of JD Edwards barcode scanning, from pricing tiers to implementation fees, but I'm joined by Steve Clampitt from ERP Suites to break it all down. If you're evaluating barcode solutions, this episode will give you the clarity and numbers you need to make a smart move. Welcome to Not Your Grandpa's JD Edwards, where we explore modern ERP tools and strategies without the fluff. I'm Nate Bushfield, and today we're tackling a big one, the cost of mobile barcode scanning in JD Edwards. Joining me is Steve Clampitt, Director of Solutions Architecture at ERP Suites. He's been deep in the trenches of mobile enablement and knows exactly what it takes to roll out a solution like Scanability. Steve, welcome back to the pod. And for the listeners out there that haven't seen you on the podcast before, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Nate. I'm glad to be back. I had a good first round, so get ready to do it again. My name's Steve Clamp, and I have been in the JD Edwards space, specifically, mostly involved in data collection, mobile data software solutions for the better part of 25 years. So I've been with ERP Suites now for a couple, and just enjoy being here and enjoy getting to know the people and helping out with everybody.
Yeah, and we have a great team, a bunch of stars, and a lot of them have been on the podcast, which has been great. A lot of knowledge here, which is fantastic in every single segment that we do have. It's really
Yeah.
overwhelming how much knowledge some of these people have. But let's start from the top. What are the basic pricing tiers for scannability, and what do those include?
So high level, we have three tiers, essentially. So our first tier is core, which it gives you about up to 25 users. You get unlimited 24/7 P1 support, native analytics, and then obviously your Android, iOS, Windows OS. Middle tier would be advanced, and that's going to give you about 75 users, unlimited 24/7 support, and then 60 hours of what we call advanced support. That basically kind of covers like flow development, any flow additions, and then application support, and then process optimization. Then our top tier, which is unlimited, that's going to give you unlimited users as well as 24/7 support with the 120 advanced hours. And then also, which typical with a SaaS product, your top level, you're going to get development platform. So as well on that top tier.
Exactly. And with that advanced or unlimited, I guess I would say, you
Yeah.
actually get a discount for the additional advanced support with the hourly rate, which is why a lot of people do end up using that. And then again, there are different situations for every company. You have the smaller companies that maybe only need 25 users. You don't need a lot of additional support. It's not something that's really in the cards for them. So there's a lot of differences. It's all what a company truly wants and what they need. It's not just buy our most expensive version because that's the one that everyone gets. No, like it is all based on your company.
Yes.
But yeah, let's dive a little deeper. How's this subscription model compared to the traditional, like what else you see out there with the buy once, upgrade later? And um, how's that approach differ? Like for
Sure.
JE users?
Yeah, sure. So, and this is going to be true of, any SaaS solution, right? We're talking, lower upfront costs, right? So right out of the gate, you're not spending as much money and you're going to have predictable monthly numbers, right? You're going to not have to worry about that. You're going to get and this is one I think is really key is you're going to get updates, right? You're going to get automatic updates. You're going to get maintenance. You're going to get scalability, right? If you need to scale up or scale down, you're going to have that, obviously. And then you're clearly going to have built-in backup data recovery for sure. And you might also be able to with that footprint, with it not being on-prem, right? You might be able to, mitigate IT resources, right? The number of people that need to manage that software might be a lot less, right? So you got that as well. And clearly with what I think is what's great for us is that you're going to be able to take advantage of the latest and greatest tools within JD Edwards, right? So 9.2 and then whatever release that we're on, you're going to be able to flow with that as you're on the product. As your JD Edwards instance grows, so can your scalability instance, right? Alongside each other.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, if you buy it once, like, when there is an upgrade, you might have to upgrade that software or something in that, and with a subscription, it kind of upgrades with it. It's kind of included. Is that
Yes.
the
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's one of the harder parts is with on-prem is that, yeah, you absolutely you take all that management and it's on you, right? Obviously, so you have to manage that software, you have to manage upgrades. You're gonna work with your vendor, of course, but that's still a task, right? That whether that's upgrading hardware, whether that's upgrading to the latest release of the software, that's still a project, right? That's still something you're gonna have to manage. So for sure, that the risk of that, or I maybe not necessarily risk, but that work kinda is on us versus you.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and, yeah, obviously for companies that maybe there is an upgrade around the corner that you guys are really thinking about, you're gonna have to wait for your buy once scannabilities. But if you need the scannability now, there's more flexibility that comes with an actual scannability versus other mobile barcode scanning solutions. Right. Right. That makes a lot of sense. But I know you touched on this a little bit about the more scannability side and what ERP Suites does. But what's a typical cost associated with each of these?
Sure. So, yeah, and this kind of depends on what you want to implement, right? So we have most customers are going to be looking at a certain suite of flows that they want to run, right? And what's always going to be the X factor is customizations, right? So as we look into that, and as you're a customer shopping, and that's one of the questions that you got to ask yourself first is how closely to base do you want to run these flows, right? And I think any time that you can do your best to stay base and stay within the flow of JD Edwards, that's going to keep your costs lower, right? It's not foolproof, but anytime that if you're running like a simple flow, right? Inventory or things like that, you're talking, you know, 5 grand, 10 grand. But if you're talking something where your customizations, where it's advanced transportation, warehouse, or anything that's heavy and thick, you could get yourself into six figures. So I just kind of you have to know that that's, as I say, any kind of level of complexion that complexity that you add, that's likely to add complexity to the bottom line, right? It's just truth. So
Exactly. And it's all based on customers again. Like it depends on what you truly need and the complexity and everything that you can think of in terms of a flow, in terms of maybe you have a very specific business that maybe we haven't seen before, or maybe whatever vendor hasn't seen before. So there might be that additional cost that goes into it. But for teams that are trying to budget, what's the advantage of knowing your annual cost up front when it comes to subscriptions?
right, well, yeah, I mean, right there, the flexibility of knowing, right, that you can plan that out, and especially when you're talking about annually, right, when you go back to do budgets, right, you're gonna know. You're gonna know what those annual costs are. Also, I think another thing that might be interesting is that you can compare apples to apples, right? When you're doing fixed and you know what you're looking at, you can kinda compare, right? When it's, software as a service, but when you're talking perpetual traditional model, it's harder to compare, right? Because you don't know what you might customize, what you might look for. It's kinda like, what are you gonna take off the shelf and pay for, right? And that's harder to manage, that's harder to know what you're gonna be getting yourself into.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot to unpack when it comes to
Right.
any type of addition when it comes to mobile barcode scanning in general.
Yep.
And there's just a little bit more flexibility, like exactly what you said. It gives you free range to your barcode scanning solution isn't holding you back from a certain upgrade or a new tools release or anything that could mess with your flows that are already there.
Yep.
Scannability, you won't really see that, is what I'm
Yes. Yeah.
understanding here, right?
Yeah, the integration between scannability and just your JDO resistance is pretty seamless, and so you do not have to worry about this, potential other set of hardware, potential other set of whether like we said earlier, like if you have to do an upgrade, that's a whole project, right? So as it with it being baked into Scannability, yeah, absolutely, very true.
Yeah, okay. That makes most sense. But what goes into implementing scannability? Beyond the subscription side, what's that look like?
Yeah. So typically, you're going to have obviously a requirements gathering process. You're going to walk through possibility as is to be scenarios and go through that process evaluation. You're also going to want to do, you'll do your warehouse shop floor walkthrough to kind of gather data as best we can to understand what you want to do, and then you're going to want to sit down with us and walk through what flows you want to use. What of the suite that we own and that we offer. What are you going to be? Are we going to be doing inventory, manufacturing? uh, you know, warehousing,
Mhm.
all that. So kind of honing down, okay, what do you have now? And then also that's going to be a conversation with what do you have now, you know, and compared to what we need to do, what we're trying to solve. And that's something we can definitely handle and we'll work with you on is, what do we have today? What workflows or scripts do you have today? And then how can we translate that into a scalability solution?
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like any other project out there, like there's a lot of similarities when it comes to this, except there isn't a lot of upfront cost
Yes.
right away. And there aren't these, oh, you have this quote and it says this amount, and it might take longer. So it's now this amount. And then, oh, no, something's not what we think. So it's now this amount. It's an upfront cost. It's right there in your contract. You have it there. It's not going to exceed it, which it feels like there's more visibility here versus other companies that are out there. Am I right with that?
Yes, and I think it also takes the stress out when you know that you are basically running these pre-built flows, as we call them, and you don't have to worry about to that level of detail, right? Like where you would get yourself into customization, right? I think we really help with that process, and we make it pretty simple. Here are the workflows that we offer, and here's the solutions that we can deliver to you without I would say a lot of the fuss that you would have in the back and forth of the design phase. We simplify that a lot.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it feels like the user experience here seems to be a little bit better, but I'm not going to make that decision yet.
Sure.
Can you give us, I know you touched on this earlier, but can you give us a ballpark range of what these custom flows usually cost to build out?
Yeah, so when we're talking, kind of a straightforward base workflow where you're just doing, a simple like an inventory transfer transaction or something like that, that's not usually customized. You're talking, smaller dollars, 5 grand, 10 grand, something like that. But as you walk yourself down into more complex territories, and you might talk about warehousing, license plating, transportation, manufacturing, where you can introduce a level of complexity, that's where things can kind of run away, right? And you have to really be paying attention to how you want to solve the problem, and that's where we come into play, and we walk through that process, and we here's what the process is today, and here's what do you want it to look like in the future state. And I've just as an industry professional, I've been in this for a long time. That's where the rubber meets the road, right? And that's where you find out you can be spending a lot of money depending on how many customizations that you might want to do. And a customization adds X level of cost always. And that customization could mean, workflow development, but it also could mean JD Edwards development. And so now your levels of complexity have gone up, which likely will mean your costs will go up as well.
Yeah, and obviously, again, it goes back to what you really need to do, but there is a certain amount of flexibility. And you're right. Like a lot of these flows that you might consider to be complex, we might have seen them before. They might not actually be that complex.
Absolutely.
It's all about having that conversation. And again, we go back to the transparency, which it seems like there's a lot more transparency from one side of it versus the other. Because, yeah, when you come to an upfront cost, they tell you this amount.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, it could become this amount with, you're like, what happened in between that?
Yes, I think that with the beauty of it is that when you want to run a transaction, what our goal is to what does that transaction look like in JD Edwards, and we're going to make that happen. And I think that's the kind of the hidden beauty of it is what we want to do is to navigate you through the JD Edwards system as best we can through our scannability product.
Yeah. And I mean, we already talking about hidden. Are there any hidden or commonly overlooked costs
Yeah,
that companies should factor into their budget?
absolutely. I mean, For sure, we're talking about uh, maintenance costs, obviously, and the idea that, you're responsible for uptime. You're responsible for that system, if that's an on-prem software solution, if any downtime that happens, that's on you, and so you have to manage that. That's resources that you have to allocate. This is true of, also of upgrades. That's when you do the implementation, right, you're excited and everything's great, but a year or 2 down the road, you're gonna have to recognize that there has been updates in that software, and you're gonna wanna utilize them, and that's something that often gets overlooked in the initial, right, ramp up of the original project. It's easy to kinda overlook that, "Hey, we might need to upgrade," and that with that upgrade comes scalability too, right? So, 5 years from now, you might need to do an upgrade, but you also might have transactional volume that requires you to upgrade. So, I think that can be hard to manage, and I understand that, but, those are some of the things that you need to really pay attention to as you're getting into it and making those decisions of what are we trying to solve, as you said, what are we trying to solve, and how do we go about that? And um, it doesn't have to be as difficult as it can be out there. So
100%. And yeah, look, everyone thinks that they know their business really well. And I'm not saying that you don't.
sure.
But what if, let's do a what if scenario. You're 5 years out, you're planning 5 years. All right, 5 years from now, I want to have an upgrade. Yeah, an upfront cost, you can pay it once. And for those 5 years, you're golden.
Yep.
But what if in that 5 years, your business takes off?
Right.
The amount of cost that is going to go into you trying to upgrade and all like maybe moving that upgrade up, or maybe you have to add more users, maybe X, Y, and Z, more custom flows. There are so many things that go into it.
Right.
They're on you. Or you have to go back to that business that you did that deal with and say, please help me.
Yeah.
We blew up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's I think as I'm thinking that that's a resource strain too, if you think about it, right? So if you go down that path, no matter what you choose to do, you're gonna have to ask more of your resources available, and that, obviously that takes your eye off the ball of your business, right? Of your business running. And if you're having to take your eye off the ball just to manage your software, just to mitigate issues within that life cycle of that piece of software, that takes effort, and that eventually costs money, as we both know. So, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And don't you want a business that it's propelling you forward and is making it easy for you to grow and not something that like, oh, we better not grow too much this year because if we grow too much, then we have to pay X, Y, and Z. And
Right.
when you're wanting to grow, when you're wanting to be successful, you're not thinking, oh, what if I become too successful? No, that's not something you ever want to think about.
Right.
Never want to think about that.
Yeah. And that happens. I mean, I've experienced that where you do have a meteoric rise in success depending on the industry and the product, right? That can absolutely happen. And the converse, and you might need to slow down. You don't want to be paying for what you don't need. I think the converse is true too. And being able to do that with relative ease, I think is pretty powerful. And that's not something you're able to do with relative ease when it's an on-prem solution and you're having to manage it yourself from front to back, right? From software, hardware, data recovery, all that stuff, right? That all that onus is on you.
Exactly. And why would you want to spend funds on something like that when you can spend it on expanding your business and making it more and more accessible for all the customers that are out there? Well, I mean, we're talking about it anyway. So, what kind of ROI are customers typically seeing within like the maybe even just the first year of using scannability?
True. So that first year, you're obviously your financial predictability, right? You're going to know your monthly cost. You're going to know your annual cost that first year, depending on the kind of contract that you sign, for sure. And anything you're gonna notice too is that you don't have to worry about upgrades. You don't have to worry about maintenance. 2 things that cost as you go along. So that first year is gonna be covered, and I think that's really beneficial to a customer that's looking to that like we said earlier, like, you may not need more than 25 users. You may not need more than 50 users, and I think you think about that, it's something they can really tailor to themselves and tailor to their solution and not have to worry about all these additional things that you would have to worry about when you're buying a kind of a traditional product off the shelf.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, we've harped on that throughout this entire episode of the flexibility, the planning side of it. You don't have to worry as much of what your success or what a change or what an upgrade or any one of these things could truly do to something that you already paid for.
Yep.
And with a subscription base too, maybe one day you wake up and you're like, actually, we're going to go in a different direction. We're going to change our hand a little bit. We're not going to need scannability. You can cancel it. Right? It's not something that you have to be a part of for the rest of your life. It's not like that at all. So
Right.
there's a tremendous amount of flexibility that you can truly see with this. And yes, maybe eventually, like if you're using scannability for, I don't know, 20 years, something like that, maybe even less, you might see that it could get more expensive than that one time cost. But throughout those 20 years, if you're not upgrading your JD Edwards system, your business is probably not working right.
Right. And I've experienced that and I've seen that, and that is a challenge to not only manage your JD Edwards instance, but also manage your barcode, your data collection system, right? Those are two separate pieces of software. Traditionally, those are two separate pieces of software that adds a level of complexity to your system, right? And as you're only as good as your JD Edwards system is, right? So as you upgrade that and as a partner, we help you with that. And then it's just this nice bolt on to put scannability right beside it, and they can grow together. And obviously we have skin in the game. We know how this works, and we're certainly here to help those customers that are ready to like know that we're going to manage you and help you through both your JD Edwards instance and your scalability solution.
100%. But are there any operational savings, like fewer errors or maybe even less training that might show up? They might not show up on an invoice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think your accuracy matters, right? And because we're building our flows based on the backbone of JD Edwards applications, right? That certainly reduces, the idea of error. And I think it's also more ready made to recognize any issues in the system as well. I think when just from my experience, if you have a solution that's kind of outside or set to the side of Oracle, JD Edwards, right? You may or may not be able to kind of have insight into what data accuracy is looking like. Whereas we're kind of plugged into right inside of JD Edwards, so you're going to know your data accuracy pretty immediately for sure. I agree with that.
Yeah, and there might be a training side of that too, like what we talked about. When it's on you, when it's on your premises, whatever,
Yeah.
uh, you might have to control it more. You might not have that additional support, or you have to pay for it. So you might have to hire new people that are coming in so that they can actually be there and
Mhm.
help you out. So if there is something that goes down, that it's a do or die situation, you have to have somebody that's there on hand.
Yeah.
There might be an additional cost that comes up to it that might actually show up on an invoice, but in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that resource planning, right? And this is true. I think I mentioned earlier, depending on how complex your solution is, you're certainly going to want to have the resources that can handle if things go sideways. If you have a runaway workflow or runaway data, and you kind of don't know what's going on, the more complex that solution is, that resource that's going to help you is pretty critical. And is that resource on your team, or is that some resource you're gonna have to pay? For sure. Yeah, that's definitely something that needs to be thought about as you're thinking about this whole solution.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, both, I'm sure you've met some of the core tech people as well that are great 24/7 help that like help
Oh,
people. They
absolutely.
are fantastic what they do.
Yes.
And some of the most knowledgeable people in our business, which honestly I wasn't really expecting until I actually had the great pleasure of talking with Chris Egan for a while.
Mhm.
That dude can talk your ear off about any number of topics, but also scannability.
Yeah,
And it's very impressive what they have truly built in that side of it.
absolutely.
And obviously they help across our entire business, not just scannability, but they are very knowledgeable about scannability. But how does scannability, so like I said that a bunch this episode, but we'll talk about it anyways. But how does scannability compare cost wise to legacy or even third party barcode tools in the JD Edwards space?
Well, I think it goes back to kind of what we've talked about before, right, earlier in the podcast where we were talking about the differences kind of between a SaaS solution and a traditional solution. So your upfront costs are clearly going to be different when you go with a SaaS solution, right? Um, and you're going to have but the niceties is that what you get with that, right? You're getting your um, updates, maintenance, scalability, DR, all that's kind of baked in. Whereas when you start talking about the costs associated with those things from a traditional perspective, those are things you have to cover. Those are things that you have to prepare for. And so I think I mentioned you this when we talked earlier this week that you've got about a 3 to 5 year window, where your upfront costs for your SaaS is going to be up there. It'll be higher, but there's going to be that point when you cross over and you've made it into that promised land of you've paid your dues and you're in it. For sure there is reasons to certainly nitpick what you want to do as a solution as a company, but I think obviously your upfront costs are going to be less, but in the annual cost might be more. But as you go down the road, you're gonna hit that 3 to 5 year mark, and you're gonna transition, and that's probably also gonna be true depending on what you choose to solve, right? How many workflows you're gonna run, and how many people you're gonna have within the system and whatnot. But I think that answers the question.
No, it definitely does. And
Yeah.
I mean, when you truly look at it, yeah, if you don't want to upgrade for the next 5 years or
Right.
7 years or whatever, I mean, yes, you are putting yourself in a later release, so you might not have all the new tools and new applications that Oracle is coming out with year after year after year.
Sure.
But at the same time, like, yeah, with scannability, yeah, you can always upgrade. There's that flexibility to it. But yeah, once you get to the 3, 5 year mark, if you haven't upgraded, maybe going with a one time cost is the better way.
Mhm.
I mean, we don't have to talk about the time value of money and what that means, but you know, how the economy is going right now. I mean,
Sure. Sure.
maybe there's a positive there. I don't know.
Right. I
But
I
we
think
can.
it's certainly specific to your needs and what you're what you're comfortable with and what you can solve. And I think as we said this whole show, like it's flexible and you can choose how you want to solve that problem. And if you want to adjust, you can do that. And that's so much easier to do when on-prem. It's harder. It's more you're a little bit more static for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for some businesses, that's completely okay. And if you want to go that way, completely go that way. But if you want to explore scannability, talk to Steve's team. Visit erpsuites.com to download our pricing. We have a great new pricing sheet that's up there right now. It's on scannability, very easy to get to under our products page, but it'll tell you exactly what the costs are, breaks it down just like Steve has for us today. But you can request a demo, schedule a one-on-one with Steve or any one of his team. But it's time to stop guessing and start planning. But thanks for tuning in to Not Your Grandpa's JD Edwards. If today's episode helped shed some light on the true cost of mobile barcode scanning, share it with your ops team or your IT director. Don't forget to like, subscribe, drop a comment with your biggest question about barcode automation. We will be answering those if you do have any questions. But until next time, optimize boldly, automate wisely, and keep building a smarter ERP. Thank you.